What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, and in this video, we're going to be going over the pros and cons for the LG Premiere Pro Plus. So let's get started. So this is the LG Premiere Pro Plus, one of the latest budget phones from LG. And so far, I'm a big fan of the phone. There's a lot that I like about it, and I feel like they're delivering a lot of value especially. And I've created a list of my top 5 favorite things and my top 5 worst things. Now I want to point out that my worst things about the phone are kind of nitpicking because I understand this is a budget device and you can't expect everything from it. However, hopefully the things that I hope that they can improve upon are implemented in the next generation of the phone. But with all that said, let's get started with the top 5 pros. So coming in at number 1 is the display. I like that we're getting a very large display here with the device. The colors are very good as well. And in general, things look very good. Now we are getting LCD display technology here at 720p. And even though it is 720p, things do look decently crisp and clear on the device, so I certainly don't have any complaints when it comes to that. I feel like things do look very good. And we're getting a PPI of 282, and we're getting a 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio, so more of a narrow but tall form factor, allowing you to fit more stuff into a single frame here. So that's especially helpful when you're on social media, browsing your feed, doing different things like that. That's really where the aspect ratio comes in handy. And then as far as the display size goes, 6.1 inches is very decent. Maybe not the largest size that I've ever seen for a budget smartphone, but still very good. Now coming in at number 2 as my second pro with this phone, that definitely has to be the ultra wide angle camera. So I was very surprised when I first heard that the LG Premiere Pro Plus featured an ultra wide, because that's typically a feature that you would expect with mid-range and higher-end phones, but maybe not something like this that's kind of a lower-end budget device. But thankfully, the results from the ultra-wide camera are very good. So here's how things look with the standard camera from the phone, and then we'll switch over to the ultra-wide, and you can see that we can fit a lot more content into the frame. Now, of course, being indoors like this is not really the best place to use the ultra-wide angle camera. In my opinion, that camera especially comes in handy if you are traveling, sightseeing, maybe you are going for a hike outdoors. Then what you can do is switch over to the ultra wide angle camera, and it gives you a new way to capture content, allowing you to fit more of your surroundings into a single picture. So I think that both the ultra wide and the standard camera both have their own specific needs and situations where they'd come in handy. So I'm certainly a fan of both. So I feel like when it comes to the LG Premiere Pro Plus, they're giving us a variety of different camera features and pretty much giving us everything that we need. One other benefit I wanted to mention real quick about the cameras is that I also like that we're getting portrait mode with both the front and rear cameras on the device. Portrait mode is another thing that, we originally had with only the high-end, top-shelf phones, but now it's made its way pretty much over to everything, and it's certainly a necessity for many people out there. Now moving on to my third favorite thing about the LG Premiere Pro Plus, and that definitely has to be the storage. So with the phone, we are getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage, and if that's not enough for you, the phone also supports microSD card expansion. Now 32 gigs is certainly not the biggest amount of storage that we've ever seen. Of course, we have other devices that have come out, such as the Samsung Galaxy A31, which is a bit more expensive, but that gives us 128 gigs. The Pixel 4a has 128 gigs. But for a phone in this price range, getting 32 gigs is still a nice thing to see, and it will give you plenty of space, at least to get started, until you might want a microSD card. So I'm glad to see that. Now moving on to my fourth favorite thing about the phone, and that is that we're getting USB-C. So it's hard to see on video here because of the phone being kind of dark, but we do have a USB-C port at the bottom, so no micro USB, and that's a great thing, especially because how things have been moving lately over the last few years. we've been transitioning away from micro USB and heading towards USB-C. And I know that for me personally, I have a lot of USB-C cables here in my office. So whenever I get a phone that has micro USB, it just makes my life a little bit harder. So we do have USB-C here. That's fantastic. Big fan of that. So thank you, LG, for giving us that. And then for my final pro with the phone, that is that we have a fingerprint sensor on the back of the device. So it's not the fastest fingerprint sensor ever, but it's fast enough where it's not an inconvenience. And it certainly is more convenient versus putting in your PIN code. So I certainly like that we are getting a fingerprint sensor on the device. It's also very convenient to access. So in general, I'm a big fan of that. Let's now get into my top 5 cons with the LG Premier Pro Plus. Now again, keep in mind, these are certainly nitpicking. There's a lot to like about this phone, but let's get into them. So number 1 is the bezels. So this phone, despite having kind of a more modern appearance, I think it still is a good looking phone. We do have decently large bezels. So for example, the bottom bezel is pretty big. The side bezels are also large as well. So I would have liked to see those trimmed down, or maybe have the display be a little bit bigger, squeezed into this decently large frame here, because they're not really making the most use of the large footprint of the phone. So I do wish those bezels were smaller. Coming in at number 2 for my second con with this phone, and that is that this phone features Android 9 Pie. Now Android 10 was launched like pretty much a year ago, and Android 9 Pie was launched even earlier, but this phone just came out like a month ago, and it still has Android 9 Pie. Now I've not heard anything about whether or not this phone will get Android 10. I certainly hope it will. I have a feeling it won't, but you know, it's not a deal breaker, but it's like one of those things that, come on LG, seriously, just give us the newest version of Android, because we've got Android 11 coming out very soon, and when that comes out, it's going to make this phone look even more sad that it has Android 9 Pie. So again, not necessarily a deal breaker. All your apps are going to work perfectly fine, but it is just a little bit of an older variant of Android, and I don't know why they gave it to us. I suppose they gave us an older version of Android because they want to give you a reason to spend more money on a more expensive LG device, but I feel like that's kind of silly. Now moving on to number 3, and that is the notch at the top. Did LG forget what year it is? It's 2020, and most phones don't have notches anymore. That was more of a 2018, 2019 kind of thing. The new way to do it is to have a hole punch at the top of the device, but unfortunately we do get the notch. And again, this is another thing that's not necessarily a deal breaker. I just would have preferred to have the hole punch. And LG has been doing hole punches on some other phones, such as the LG Q70. That phone, which is a bit more expensive, kind of a more mid-range device from LG, that does have a hole punch at the top. So I wish they did that with every phone coming out this year. But unfortunately, they did not. And then moving on to my 4th con about the phone, that is the Google Assistant button at the side. Now, 2 things. First thing is, the button's pretty pointless. You can easily access Google Assistant just by tapping on the bar here in the OS, but also, I just don't like it. I wish that this button could be remapped to do other things. Unfortunately, it cannot. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice having the button, I suppose, for some people, but I'm someone that actually does use Google Assistant quite often. I have multiple Nest Minis around my house and other Google Home products, and I don't find this button to be useful. So if anything, it's just an extra button to confuse you, to have you accidentally tap on, and I just feel like it doesn't really serve any sort of useful purpose. And then finally, moving on to my last con about the LG Premier Pro Plus, and that is that we're only getting 2 gigabytes of RAM. Seriously, LG? Come on, give us 3. Like, we need more RAM than just 2. Like, that's good enough to allow you to use the device. I mean, this phone is still usable, don't get me wrong, and that's thanks to the processor. But if we had extra RAM, it would have made a difference. And I'm not even asking for 4, just 3. Give us 3, please. But unfortunately, it's just 2. So that's another thing that's not a deal breaker, but I really hope that the successor to this phone does give us 3 gigabytes. But those are my pros and cons about the LG Premier Pro Plus. Like I mentioned earlier, I still am a fan of this phone, and the cons are really more just suggestions that LG might want to think about when designing the successor to this phone, which I'd imagine won't be out for quite some time. So those are the pros and cons of the phone in my opinion. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's other ones I missed out on in the video, or let me know if you disagree with some of the claims that I've made. But my name is Kevin. This is LG Premiere Pro Plus, Best and Worst Things, and I will see you in the next one.